The night was still, save for the faint clinking of chains as prisoners shifted uneasily in their sleep. Harry's sharp green eyes scanned the narrow gap between the barracks and the fence. He tugged at the collar of his tattered jumpsuit, the fabric rough against his neck. Weeks of captivity had etched deep lines into his face, his once proud military posture now tempered by exhaustion. Yet his resolve burned as fiercely as ever. Beside him, Ryan Ellis fidgeted nervously, his youthful face pale under the dim light. "Are you sure about this, sir?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the camp's power generators. Harry shot him a sidelong glance. "We don't have a choice, Corporal. If we wait for a miracle, we'll end up like the others." His tone was clipped, each word laced with the weight of command. Ryan swallowed hard but nodded. The two men crept forward, keeping close to the shadows. Ahead, the guard tower loomed, its sharp angles slicing through the mist. A Veltrax sentry stood at the top, its elongated form backlit by the sickly green glow of alien machinery. The creature's segmented, insect-like eyes swept the camp, its posture exuding a cold, predatory confidence. Harry gestured for Ryan to hold position and edged closer to the barracks wall. The faint hum of alien voices reached his ears, a guttural language that was almost impossible for human tongues to replicate. He froze, his breath caught in his throat, as two Veltrax guards rounded the corner just meters away. Dispose of the remaining humans by morning, one of them hissed in their chittering dialect, its words crackling through a translation device strapped to its chest. "We've lingered here too long. The High Command demands efficiency." Harry's blood ran cold. He clenched his fists, his nails biting into his palms as the guards continued down the path, oblivious to his presence. Turning back to Ryan, he mouthed the words, "We're out of time." They moved quickly but silently, weaving between the rusted structures that made up the camp. As they neared the fence, Ryan hesitated, his gaze fixed on a side door partially concealed by shadows. "What's in there?" he whispered. Harry hesitated, torn between the instinct to escape and the nagging pull of curiosity. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice low but firm. He slipped through the door, his pulse quickening as he descended a narrow staircase. The air grew colder, the faint metallic tang of blood assaulting his senses. At the bottom, a vast chamber stretched out before him, illuminated by flickering pale lights. Rows upon rows of bodies were laid out on the cold metal floor, their lifeless forms stripped of dignity. The sight hit Harry like a physical blow. The prisoners, his comrades, had been slaughtered, their bodies marked with precise, surgical incisions. Their expressions, frozen in death, were a harrowing tableau of pain and fear. Harry stumbled back, his breath ragged. Anger flared in his chest, a fire that burned away the despair threatening to overwhelm him. He knelt by one of the bodies, a young soldier whose dog tags dangled loosely from his neck. The tags bore a name, Private Jacob Reed. Beneath the tags, tucked into the soldier's jumpsuit, Harry found a folded scrap of paper. The edges were singed, the text scrawled hastily in pencil. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the cryptic message. "They know. Veltrax internal discord. Coordinates, trust no one." Footsteps echoed above. Harry stuffed the paper into his pocket and bolted back up the stairs. He found Ryan waiting, his expression a mix of concern and urgency. "What happened? What's down there?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling. "Not now. We need to move," Harry said sharply. Together, they made their way toward the fence, their movements swift but deliberate. Ryan's breathing grew heavier, his nerves fraying under the weight of the situation. "Do you think anyone will come for us?" he asked, his tone desperate. Harry didn't answer immediately. He could hear the faint whir of Veltrax drones patrolling the perimeter. The cold truth was that no one was coming, not unless they made it back to human space with the grim truth of what had happened here. The fence loomed before them, a towering barrier crackling with energy. Ryan pulled a crude device from his pocket, cobbled together from scavenged alien tech. He attached it to the fence, his hands shaking as he worked to disable the electrical current. "Come on," Harry muttered under his breath, his eyes darting toward the guard tower. The Veltrax sentry was still scanning the camp, its gaze sweeping perilously close to their position. A loud crackle and a burst of sparks signaled the device's success. The fence's energy field flickered and died, leaving a narrow opening. "Go," Ryan urged, motioning for Harry to move first. Harry slipped through the gap, turning to help Ryan on the other side. But as Ryan began to climb through, a piercing alarm shattered the stillness of the night. "They've spotted us," Ryan shouted, panic flashing across his face. Veltrax guards emerged from the shadows, their sleek weapons raised. Ryan shoved Harry forward. "Run!" "No!" Harry yelled, reaching for his friend. But Ryan was already turning back, drawing the attention of the guards with a defiant shout. The last thing Harry saw before he sprinted into the darkness was Ryan standing tall, his face set with determination as the Veltrax closed in. The sound of weapons fire echoed behind him, but Harry didn't look back. His legs burned as he pushed himself forward, the message in his pocket growing heavier with every step. He stumbled over the rocky terrain, the camp shrinking into the distance behind him. The bitter wind stung his face, but he didn't stop. Ryan's sacrifice would not be in vain. The horrors he had witnessed, the lives lost, they demanded justice. As he crested a ridge, the faint glow of a human escape pod came into view. He collapsed inside, his chest heaving, and initiated the launch sequence. The small craft shot into the night sky, leaving the cursed planet behind. Harry leaned back against the pod's cold metal wall, his hands shaking. The weight of the paper in his pocket was a constant reminder of what he had to do. The Veltrax had crossed a line, and humanity would make them pay. For now, though, he allowed himself a single, ragged breath of relief. The war was far from over, but he had survived to fight another day, and that was all he needed. The sterile air of Earth's Central Command Station was heavy with tension as Lieutenant Harry Cross stepped into the vast chamber. The walls, lined with holographic screens displaying troop movements and interstellar maps, buzzed with activity. Around a central table, the Federation's most influential leaders had gathered, their faces grim under the harsh artificial lighting. Harry's boots echoed on the polished floor, the sound carrying an unspoken weight as he approached. Admiral Theodore Rogers stood at the head of the table, his tall, imposing figure exuding authority. His silver hair and sharply cut uniform gave him a statuesque presence, but his piercing blue eyes betrayed a weariness earned through decades of war. Rogers regarded Harry with a measured expression, his hands clasped behind his back. "Lieutenant Cross," Rogers began, his voice even but firm, "we reviewed your report. It's difficult to believe. It's the truth, sir," Harry replied, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into his features. He reached into his pocket and produced a folded scrap of paper he had found in the prison chamber. This wasn't just an isolated act of brutality. The Veltrax have been methodically exterminating human prisoners, and they've got fractures in their ranks. We can use that. Murmurs rippled through the room as the council members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a wiry man with sharp features named General Clark, leaned forward. "This could be propaganda. The Veltrax are cunning. We need more proof before we escalate this into a full-scale war." Harry's temper flared, but he kept it in check. "With respect, General, how much more proof do you need? I watched them massacre our people. I carried the bodies of soldiers who died because we underestimated the Veltrax before. If we don't act now, we'll lose what little advantage we have left." Rogers raised a hand, silencing the debate. He turned his gaze to Harry, studying him intently. "You're suggesting we move beyond containment. Total war, Lieutenant. That's what you're asking for." "Yes, sir," Harry said, meeting Rogers's gaze without hesitation. "It's what the Veltrax have already declared. We're just choosing whether or not to respond." For a moment, the room fell silent, save for the faint hum of machinery. Then Rogers nodded, his expression hardening. Very well. We mobilize. The words hung in the air like a hammer blow. The chamber erupted into activity as orders were relayed, and officers hurried to their stations. Harry exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging as the weight of his mission began to settle on him. Outside the command station, Earth's orbital shipyards came alive with purpose. Massive dreadnoughts, their hulls gleaming under the light of the distant sun, were readied for battle. Swarms of fighter craft darted between the colossal vessels, their sleek designs a testament to human ingenuity. On the ground below, recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers, civilians trading their lives of routine for the chance to defend their species. Amid the chaos, Harry found himself in a hangar bay, watching as squads of soldiers prepared for deployment. He spotted Sergeant Marcus Gray, a towering figure with dark, close-cropped hair and an air of unshakable calm. Gray was overseeing a group of recruits, his deep voice carrying easily over the clamor. "Keep your formations tight and your heads on a swivel," Gray instructed. "The Veltrax don't fight fair. You make one mistake, and you'll be a memory." Harry approached, and Gray turned to greet him with a curt nod. "Lieutenant, heard you raised hell in the council room." Harry allowed himself a faint smile. "Had to. We don't have time for politics." "Politics or not, you lit a fire," Gray said, his tone neutral. "These men and women are ready to fight. But they'll need more than speeches to survive." "They'll get it," Harry promised, his gaze hardening. "And they'll have me in the fight with them." Nearby, Captain Ethan Blake leaned against a crate of supplies, his lean frame relaxed despite the urgency surrounding him. Blake's sharp features and cocky grin gave him the look of someone who thrived on chaos. He twirled a wrench in one hand, inspecting a nearby fighter craft with the other. "So, you're the guy who started all this," Blake called out, his tone laced with humor. "You must have a hell of a story, Lieutenant." Harry shot him a pointed look. "It's not a story, Captain. It's a war." Blake shrugged, unbothered. "War, story, depends on who's telling it. Either way, I hear we're hitting Rothar 7 first. That's Veltrax territory, deep in their space. It's a strategic target," Harry said. "And if we take it, we cut off their supply lines." "If we take it," Blake echoed, his grin widening. "Sounds like my kind of odds." Despite himself, Harry felt a small spark of amusement. Blake's confidence was reckless, but it was infectious. They would need that kind of spirit in the battles to come. As the preparations continued, Harry returned to his quarters to review the decoded message he had found. The coordinates listed in the note pointed to a remote Veltrax stronghold, one that intelligence reports had missed. If the message was accurate, it could hold the key to crippling their enemies' defenses. The thought gnawed at him. The Veltrax weren't just a formidable adversary. They were methodical, calculating. He couldn't shake the feeling that this war would be unlike any humanity had faced before. The next morning, Harry joined Admiral Rogers in the strategy room, where a holographic projection of the Veltrax territory dominated the center of the room. The system's planets glowed with hostile red markers, their defenses formidable even from a distance. "This is what we're up against," Roger said, his tone grim. "The Veltrax have fortified every major outpost. If we're going to win, we'll need more than brute force." Harry nodded. "We have an advantage, Admiral. The fractures in their ranks, they're vulnerable, even if they don't know it yet. We exploit that, and we turn their strength against them." "It's a gamble," Roger said, his expression unreadable. "So is doing nothing," Harry replied. For a moment, the two men locked eyes, and Rogers gave a slight nod. "Then we gamble." As the fleet began to move out, Harry stood on the bridge of the lead ship, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a reminder of both the enormity of the universe and the fragility of their place within it. Behind him, Marcus Gray stepped onto the bridge, his presence steady and grounding. "You ready for this?" he asked. Harry turned, his expression resolute. I don't think anyone's ever ready for war, but we do what we have to. Gray nodded, his eyes hardening. Then let's make it count. As the fleet entered hyperspace, the hum of the engines filled the air, a sound that carried with it both dread and determination. Harry's mind raced with thoughts of the battles ahead, of the lives that would be lost and the sacrifices that would be made. But beneath it all was a single unshakable truth. Humanity would not go quietly into the dark. This war had begun with blood. It would end with fire. The battle for Radhar 7 erupted with a ferocity that shook the void of space. Massive dreadnoughts exchanged fire, their energy weapons slicing through the darkness in searing arcs of destruction. Explosions rippled across the battlefield, the distant bursts illuminating the cold, desolate surface of the planet below. Amid the chaos, Lieutenant Harry Cross gripped the railing of the command deck aboard the Valiant, his voice cutting through the cacophony of alarms and shouted orders. "Focus fire on their lead cruiser. We need to break their formation," Harry commanded. His eyes locked on the holographic display that tracked the movements of both fleets. The Veltrax ships moved with precision, their formation resembling a deadly swarm. Captain Ethan Blake, manning the helm, let out a low whistle as he navigated through the debris field. "They're not pulling any punches. They've got more firepower than the intel suggested." Harry's jaw tightened. "Then we hit harder, target their engines, and cut their maneuverability. If we can disrupt their coordination, we have a shot." The Valiant shook violently as a Veltrax missile struck its shields. Sparks flew from a nearby console, and the acrid scent of burning circuitry filled the air. Chief Engineer Nolan Graves, a wiry man with a perpetual scowl, shouted over the din, "Shields are holding, but another hit like that and we're toast." "Make them count, Graves," Harry snapped. On the surface of Radhar 7, Sergeant Marcus Gray led a ground assault against a heavily fortified Veltrax outpost. The landscape was a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and ash-filled winds, the remnants of a planet stripped of life. Gray's team advanced under heavy fire, the alien weapons emitting sharp, piercing screeches as they cut through the air. "Suppressing fire on that ridge," Gray bellowed, his deep voice carrying over the roar of battle. A squad of soldiers moved into position, their pulse rifles spitting blue energy bolts that lit up the dust-choked sky. Private Aaron Keller, the youngest member of Gray's team, huddled behind cover, his hands trembling as he reloaded. "Sarge, we're pinned down. They've got snipers everywhere." Gray knelt beside him, his expression calm despite the chaos. "Stay low, Keller. Focus on the target in front of you. The second you let fear take over, you're done." A distant explosion rocked the ground, and Gray glanced toward the source. A squadron of human fighter craft streaked overhead, their engines screaming as they strafed Veltrax positions. The distraction was enough to break the stalemate, and Gray signaled his team to advance. Meanwhile, Harry monitored the ground battle from the Valiant, his hands gripping the edge of the command table. "Status report on Gray's team," he demanded. "They're making progress," reported Lieutenant Sophia Reyes, one of the tactical officers. "But Veltrax reinforcements are inbound. They won't hold that position for long without support." Harry nodded sharply. "Divert 2 squadrons of fighters to cover them. We can't afford to lose that outpost." As the fleet continued to hammer the Veltrax ships, Harry's attention was drawn to a new threat. A massive Veltrax dreadnought, larger and more heavily armed than anything they'd encountered before, emerged from hyperspace. Its presence was like a shadow blotting out the stars, its weapons already primed and firing. The Valiant shook as the dreadnought unleashed a barrage of plasma fire. Captain Blake cursed under his breath. "That thing's a monster. How the hell are we supposed to take it down?" Harry's mind raced. The odds were stacked against them, but retreat wasn't an option. Focus all fire on that dreadnought. If we take it out, the rest of their fleet will crumble. As the human fleet regrouped, Harry's gaze shifted to a smaller Veltrax ship that had broken away from the formation. It moved erratically, as if damaged, but something about its movements caught his attention. "Reyes, get me a scan on that ship," he ordered. The tactical officer's fingers flew over her console. "It's carrying a strange energy signature. Could be a command vessel." Harry's eyes narrowed. "If we take that ship, we might be able to access their communications and learn their next move." "Risky play, Lieutenant," Blake said, his tone skeptical. "It's the only play," Harry replied. The Valiant surged forward, its weapons blazing as it carved a path toward the Veltrax ship. Smaller enemy fighters swarmed around them, their weapons peppering the Valiant's shields. Graves' voice crackled over the comms. "Shields are at 20%. We're not going to last much longer. Just get me close enough to board that ship," Harry said. He turned to Reyes. "Prepare a strike team." Minutes later, Harry led the team onto the Veltrax vessel, their boots clanging against the alien metal. The corridors were dimly lit, the walls pulsing with an eerie organic glow. The team moved cautiously, their weapons at the ready. "Stay sharp," Harry whispered. "This isn't going to be easy." The sound of clicking mandibles echoed through the ship, and the team froze. Veltrax warriors emerged from the shadows, their chitinous armor gleaming under the dim light. The two sides clashed in a brutal firefight, the confined space amplifying the chaos. Harry's pulse rifle barked as he took down one of the aliens, its body crumpling to the floor. He glanced back to see Keller, the young private from Gray's team, struggling to keep his composure. "Keller, focus!" Harry shouted. "I've got it," Keller replied, his voice shaking but determined. The team pushed forward, eventually reaching the ship's bridge. The alien command console was a bewildering array of glowing symbols and organic interfaces. Harry motioned for Reyes, who had joined the team as the tech specialist, to take over. "Can you access their systems?" he asked. Reyes nodded, her fingers working quickly to bypass the alien security protocols. "This will take a minute. Cover me." The Veltrax launched another attack, their warriors charging into the bridge. Harry and the others fought desperately to hold them off, the tension mounting with every passing second. "Almost there," Reyes shouted. Finally, the console emitted a high-pitched chime, and Reyes stepped back. "Got it. Their communications are compromised. We've got their next target, Earth." Harry's blood ran cold. The Veltrax weren't just retaliating. They were preparing to strike at the heart of humanity. "Download everything you can," he said. "We need to warn Central Command." The team retreated to their transport, the Veltrax ship erupting in flames behind them as the Valiant fired a final volley. On board, Harry relayed the grim news to Admiral Rogers. "We've bought ourselves time," Harry said, his voice heavy with the weight of the revelation. "But the Veltrax aren't backing down. They're bringing the war to us." Rogers' expression was unreadable as he nodded. "Then we'll meet them head-on, whatever it takes." As the fleet regrouped, Harry stared out at the battlefield, the stars beyond it cold and distant. The war had escalated, the stakes rising with every encounter. But amid the chaos and destruction, one thing was clear. The fight for humanity's survival was far from over. The Earth defenses had never seen such a sight. A vast armada of Veltrax ships, their dark, menacing silhouettes blotting out the stars, loomed on the edge of the solar system. Humanity's fleets, though smaller in number, were prepared. Dreadnoughts, destroyers, and fighter squadrons were in formation, their sleek designs a testament to both engineering brilliance and desperation. On board the Valiant, Lieutenant Harry Cross stood on the bridge, his expression a mask of resolve. Every fiber of his being was focused on the task at hand. The weight of humanity's survival bore down on him, but he refused to buckle. "Admiral Rogers, all fleets report ready," Harry said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Admiral Rogers' holographic image appeared beside him, her face lined with grim determination. "Good. Remember, Lieutenant, this isn't just about victory. If Earth falls, humanity falls. We fight with everything we've got." Harry nodded sharply. "Understood?" Admiral, the Veltrax ships began their advance, their formations shifting like a living organism. Their massive dreadnoughts, bristling with weaponry, led the charge, while smaller, more agile fighters swarmed around them like a deadly cloud. Enemy fleet is splitting into 3 groups, Lieutenant Sophia Reyes reported. Her hands flew over the tactical console, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. They're trying to flank us. Harry's mind raced. Counter with beta formation. We keep our heavy hitters in the center and divert our interceptors to the flanks. Don't let them break through. The Valiant surged forward, leading the charge. The first wave of Veltrax fighters descended upon them, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. Explosions erupted all around as the 2 forces clashed, the sheer ferocity of the battle leaving no room for hesitation. On the ground below, Sergeant Marcus Gray and his team held the line against Veltrax ground forces attempting to infiltrate Earth's defense grid. The battlefield was a chaotic mix of smoke, fire, and the relentless shriek of alien weapons. "Hold your positions," Gray roared, his voice cutting through the din. "We give them nothing." Private Keller, crouched behind a barricade, fired off a shot that took down a charging Veltrax warrior. His hands no longer trembled. The fear that had once gripped him had been replaced by a hardened resolve. "Is it me, or are there more of them every time we look up?" Keller shouted over the noise. Gray smirked grimly. "You wanted action, didn't you?" In orbit, the Valiant was locked in a desperate battle against a Veltrax dreadnought. Captain Ethan Blake maneuvered the ship with reckless precision, dodging enemy fire while returning it with equal ferocity. Shields are down to 30%. Graves yelled from engineering. "Push them harder." Harry commanded. "Target their weapon systems." The Valiant unleashed a barrage of firepower, striking the Veltrax dreadnought's main weapons array. The enemy ship shuddered under the impact, its return fire faltering. "We've got them," Blake called out, his grin returning despite the odds. Before they could celebrate, a new threat emerged. The Veltrax flagship, an enormous vessel bristling with weaponry and emitting an ominous red glow, entered the fray. Its weapons tore through the human fleet with devastating precision, its presence a chilling reminder of the Veltrax's technological superiority. "All ships, focus fire on the flagship." Admiral Rogers' voice came over the comms, resolute and commanding. Harry's gaze hardened. "Reyes, analyze that flagship. Find me a weakness." Reyes worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console. Their core reactor is heavily shielded, but there's a venting system on the lower decks. If we can get a strike team inside, we might be able to overload it. "That's a suicide mission," Blake muttered. Harry didn't hesitate. "It's our only shot. Prep a transport." "I'm leading the team." Blake turned, his expression dark. "You always volunteer for the worst jobs, don't you?" "If I'm asking people to risk their lives, I'm going to be there with them," Harry replied firmly. Minutes later, Harry, Reyes, and a small strike team boarded a transport ship and headed for the Veltrax flagship. The journey was harrowing, the ship dodging waves of enemy fire before finally breaching the enemy's hull. Inside, the team moved quickly, their weapons at the ready. The corridors were alive with the sound of alien alarms and the scuttling of Veltrax warriors. The atmosphere was oppressive, the ship's organic design making it feel like they were walking through the belly of a beast. "Reyes, which way?" Harry asked. Reyes consulted her handheld scanner. "Down this corridor. The reactor's close." As they pressed on, the Veltrax launched a ferocious counterattack. The team fought valiantly, their pulse rifles lighting up the dark corridors. Harry's heart pounded as he took down enemy after enemy, his focus unwavering. They reached the reactor chamber, its pulsating red core dominating the room. Reyes immediately got to work, connecting her equipment to the alien interface. "How long?" Harry asked, his rifle trained on the entrance. 5 minutes. If I don't blow us up first," Reyes quipped, her voice tight with concentration. The Veltrax swarmed the chamber, their relentless assault pushing the team to their limits. Keller, fighting alongside Gray, had joined the mission at the last second, his youthful determination shining through. "They just keep coming," Keller yelled, firing into the advancing horde. "Then we keep fighting," Gray barked, his tone unyielding. Reyes finally shouted, "Done. Overload sequence initiated. We've got 2 minutes to get out of here." The team retreated, fighting their way back to the transport as the ship's alarms blared. Explosions rippled through the flagship, the overload spreading rapidly. As they boarded the transport and launched back toward the Valiant, the Veltrax flagship erupted in a blinding explosion, its destruction sending shockwaves across the battlefield. On the bridge of the Valiant, Harry watched as the remaining Veltrax ships faltered, their formation breaking apart. The human fleet pressed the advantage, overwhelming their enemies with a final, decisive strike. Cheers erupted across the comms as the last of the Veltrax ships were destroyed. Admiral Rogers' voice came through, filled with rare emotion. "We've done it. Earth is safe. For now." Back on the ground, Gray and Keller stood amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, their armor scorched and their faces grim but triumphant. "We held the line," Gray said quietly, looking out at the rising sun. Keller nodded, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. "We did." As the survivors regrouped, Harry found himself staring out at the stars from the Valiant's observation deck. The cost of victory weighed heavily on him, but so did the knowledge that humanity had endured. Blake joined him, leaning casually against the railing. "So, what's next, fearless leader?" Harry's lips curved into a faint smile. "We rebuild, and we stay ready. This war might be over, but the fight isn't finished.